Hi and welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today we're talking about our AZURE project and how we're finishing it up. And I know I had a video on sashing just the other day, but I want to revisit some of that sashing information and maybe take it one step further. We'll be right back and get started with that. Well, hi and welcome back. As you can see, I have part of the AZURE project here on the board, so we can kind of take a look at how it's shaping up. And this is everything except the one row I'm working on now. Couple of points that I'd like to make. I have found that getting the paper off the back of these pieces can be incredibly difficult. And what I've decided to do is to leave the paper on the sides that still need to be sewn to something else until I sew that seam, and then I'm taking that paper out. And it's taking a great deal of time to do that. So in the past, when I would start sewing my blocks together with the sashing, it would go really quickly. And what I'm finding is it's taking as long or longer to take the paper out than it did to prep everything, trimming the blocks, setting them together with the sashing, pinning them and sewing them. So just be mindful of that when you get started. So we have the last row here, and I've pinned this together according to a picture that I took once I got all the pieces in place in a design that I really like the best. And now we're going to sew those seams so that we can sew the blocks together into a row. Let's do a little bit of that right now. I've got my machine set on a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm using my seam guide. I have narrowed that seam just slightly, just 2 clicks on my machine, just so it's a scant 1/4 inch. And I have a 2.4 as my stitch length, which is my normal stitch length for most regular seams. Okay, let's get started. We're going to sew. There's a lot of bulk with some of these seams, so it takes a little bit of extra effort to get them through. And that may mean just a little tug at the other side, or you may need to use something like a stiletto to assist it going through under your feed, presser foot and feed dogs to keep it moving. Okay, so we have that strip finished. I think you can see that here. Now, let's take it, look at it from this side, and I think we've got a pretty good result. Just checking my seam widths there, and it will open up a little bit more once the paper's out. Part of the problem with the paper is it keeps it in its pre-sewn shape, and sometimes that can distort the size of your block. And then what we have to do is we have to come in here and take out this basting stitch. And this is one here that looks like it has 2 basting stitches. I think this one was one that was wanting to come apart after we got it assembled. So we ran a second basting stitch along this edge. So we may need to take the time to get both of those out of there. And this is what I said about what's time consuming on these blocks, because you normally wouldn't have to do this, but with foundation paper piecing, if you're going to baste along the edges, you're going to have that. And you're going to have paper removal for your regular seams as well. It's just a matter of whether you can do that before you get to this stage or not. Okay, let's start pulling some of that out. There we go. And then we need to pull the paper from the other side as well. Okay, and we've got a piece in here. We need to somehow get that out of there if we can. And you can see why this is so time consuming, because there's so many little tiny pieces. Okay, we've got all but that one little piece right there. And I think the problem with that is it's got still some stitching in there. We're not getting, there we go, part of it. We're not getting it out. And the more it's handled and the more it's pressed, and it becomes more pliable, and it makes it harder to get out instead of easier to get out, because it just kind of goes with the flow. I'll try to take a little bit more of this out. I am still under the belief that there has got to be a better way to get this paper out. And if you know what that is and can share it with us, I would love to hear it. My way of thinking is that you really need to work as you go, not let it wait till the very end, because some of this you're just not going to be able to get to if you wait till the very end. Okay. Now, let me show you something. This is one of the places where we had some issues with the pieces not coming together just accurately. And I think what I'm going to do, I have a little scrap here from the sashing that is the same fabric that we're using. And I think I'm just going to cut a little strip, maybe about 1/2 inch. This is a piece off the selvage. And I am going to use some applique glue, if we can get it open. There we go. And I'm just going to lay that right over that. So if it does show when we're all done, we will have a bit of a finished edge there instead of a raw edge. And then as soon as it dries, I'll trim it up a little bit. Okay, that's that. Now, I did hesitate in coming in today to film because some of this is frankly boring, to be able to sit here and watch me sew little pieces and take out paper. But I think what I'm going to do is take a little bit of a break and take out just enough paper that we can move forward with putting another row of sashing between this. I think this is actually the top row. So this will go on the very top, I believe. I'll have to check my picture for verification of that. And come back and show you that last horizontal sashing going in, and then start on the borders. The borders are the same size as the sashing, so it's going to be a lot of the same thing, but at least to show you how I'm going to put those on. So I'll be back in just a second for you. It's probably going to take me a little while though. I'll be back. Well, thanks for sticking with us. While you've been gone, what I've done is I've sewed the sashing on this one strip, and I've taken most of the paper off of that one seam we just sewed. I've left some of the rest of it on for now. Because as I said, it is a time-consuming process and I don't want to delay us too much today. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the ends, and I use this little marker and it's still folded up just like I sewed it. And I want to make sure that I'm cutting a straight line that's perpendicular to the long edge of our sashing, and it is long enough for the side of our block as well. And I think you're right at the edge, so let me pull that up just a little bit. My desktop's a little messy. That's the other thing I was talking about. So I'm lined up here, and then on this side I'm going to line up with the block and then go over just a smidgen. And when I say smidgen, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, just to make sure that when it unfolds, we're going to have enough. And then I'll do this other on the same end. I'll do the same thing on the other end. Line it up on the bottom. And then we're going to cut it. This is a little awkward. I don't recommend that angle, but for that little bit it should be fine. And I'm going to trim some of these threads. There's so many threads. Okay, it's not pressed yet, but we don't need to press to move forward. So let me turn this way. This is going to be the top of the quilt. And let me tell you a little bit about why I picked this particular row to be the top, because I figured the top and the center are the two areas that you pay the most attention to. And on the top here we have rising sun, the tree of life, and fish. And for some reason those blocks really resonate with me and kind of give a little bit of meaning to the book that we're using as the patterns for this. So just personally speaking, that was one of the reasons why I picked that. Gosh, there's so much paper on this table. All right, so now we're going to unfold this. We do need to press it, but we don't have to press it now because we're going to sew on this side, not this side. And then here is how it's going to connect. So we're going to flip all of this over and start lining up. Now, when you are sewing sashing on and you want to make sure that those blocks are lined up, you have to have kind of an imaginary line. Let me get this ruler. From this block to this block. And there's a couple of ways you could do that. See, I've got that lined up here. Now, if I could depend on it to stay exactly still, we could line it up here. Let's maybe start with these first 2 pins. And then we could go to the next one. We're going to put that here. And the secret is here, we want that seam to land right here on that ruler. I think it's going to be kind of iffy if you can see that. So let's pin it and see what we're doing. Now we're going to flip it and take a little quick check. And it looks like we've done a pretty good job there. We've lined that up pretty well. Now another way you can do that I wish all this paper wasn't here. I just blew a bunch of it on me. Okay. The other way you can do this, and this might be a little bit hard to see because we're on our last row, but we're going to just kind of pin it just as it is. And then we're going to pull back this top and see when we fold that back up, are we lined up here? And it looks like we are. We're doing pretty well. Now, when I'm pinning these, I'm actually giving the blocks just a little bit of a pull. And I don't mean a little bit of a pull, I mean just a little tug to make sure that the seams are open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and pin, and then I'm going to check. And we should end up at the end of the fabric, which that looks really good. A couple more pins, one in the middle, and then a couple in the middle here. Okay, now we need to double check, and I'm gonna flip this around just because it's a little easier for me to handle and show you. Okay. So you can see that we're pretty much lined up here, 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 here. And these look a little bit off. So let's revisit that. Take that pin out. And I think I'm going to take back to here because these were the two that were off. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out which one is off, which one is short, and tugging that fabric. So in this case, it's the one on the bottom. And then I'm going to pin. And I think I'm going to tug one more time. Okay, let's look. Okay, much better. Much better. We're still just a little bit off, and I think this one just needs to be pulled out a little bit more when we connect it. So we're going to try that. We know we're good to here. So we're going to give it a little firmer tug, and we're going to put in more pins. So we're going to tug and pin. Tug. Pin, and then one more time. Okay, that's a little bit better. I think we're going to go with that because that little bit of difference that we're seeing when they're 2 inches apart is really not going to show up that much. Now, the one thing we do need to do is go to the other side and put the pins back in, because we're going to sew with the seam side up. So those need to be on the other side. It's just a matter of taking them off one side and putting them on the other side. Okay, nothing too difficult, nothing too special, and we're just going to sew that with our regular 1/4 inch seam. All right, and our last row is connected. You want to make sure when you're sewing that that your seams don't flip up on you to go the wrong direction, because then you'll have extra bulk in your fabric. All right. One day I'm going to get a rolling mat, so I don't have so much problem moving my chair. Oh goodness. Okay. So this is the seam here that we just put in. And now when we'll get it all pressed out, I think everything matches up really nicely. And once it's pressed, it's going to look really good. Now, what are we going to do next? I think the next thing to do is start working on the borders. And we could do fancy mitered borders, but I think in a project like this, we just don't need that. This is something a little more simple. So let's look at what our options are for our borders. And we're going to take the long side first. We're going to try to see if we can get a side border, a vertical border out of one strip of fabric. I'm kind of hoping we can, and we can. So we'll do that, and the reason I'm doing that is if we put the top and bottom borders on and then try to do the sides, it's not good. The border of fabric, because it's width of fabric, is not going to be long enough, most likely. If we put the sides on and then do the top, because the top is only 4 blocks, we'll have plenty of fabric. So we'll be able to get it done in 4 strips, and we won't have to cut anymore. So we're going to have that same border that's going to finish at 2 inches along the outside. And you could, if you're doing this and you want to use it for either a lap quilt or a bed quilt, you can add more blocks to get it closer to the size you want or to the shape you want. For example, you could do 4x4 or 5x5, 6x6, whichever design you wanted to do. You could do a 4x6, which would probably be great for a lap quilt if you wanted to stretch out on your sofa. Would give you a little longer quilt. But we're going to do it this side because this is intended for my purposes to be a wall hanging. Now, doing it, putting this border on is going to be straightforward, just like we did everything else. And it should not be any craziness that you have to do. The only thing I'm going to do is when I get it all pinned on and get ready to do the other side, I'm going to take whatever I take off, whatever I trim off, and use that kind of as a guide for the other side, because they should be the same length, to know whether one side might be a little longer than the other, and then check it with measurements. So if I need to ease one in, I can. So I'm just going to start with this one and then do the other one in the same manner. I think I'm going to leave you here with this today. When we come back next time, all 4 borders will be on and it'll be pressed, and we will talk then about adding the trim that we made recently. And the reason I did this was to get us a design perk on this particular project that made it stand out a little more. I thought about doing a double border where we had a border inside a border, but I really wanted something really small, and I didn't want to deal with having a 1/4 inch strip of fabric, because that would be very finicky to try to match up at all the corners. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to put this trim piece, and it's got a lot of string still, right along the center of all of these sashings. You'll have to disregard the fraying. And let me see if I can, it would look something like that. And we would have it come, we would put the trim here on the outside as well, so it'd block it in like a window almost. And we would have this trim come right underneath that. Now, I'm planning on doing that. This is the way I'm planning right now to do it, is to get it and carefully place it on and place it with glue. And then I'm going to hand stitch that blue trim on for a couple of reasons. Number one, I can keep it super straight doing that. If I try to sew it on the machine, it's going to get all wonky because I just cannot seem to keep a seam really straight and keep the seam itself on the very edge of something skinny. Does that make sense? So that you're sewing like a top stitching. I have a hard time with top stitching, and I always have. I don't know why, but I do. And also I enjoy the hand stitching. So that gives me something that I can sit and do in the evenings, which I really enjoy. And I haven't really had anything like that in a while. So That would be very good for me. But we're going to do that, and that's my plan, to put that on there. I think it's maybe going to be a little challenging to get it straight and keep it straight, but we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. So when we come back next time, we'll be talking about this trim, and maybe I'll have a little bit of it done and can show you what's done and then show you how I'm doing it. That gives me the chance to kind of test it ahead of time, which I always appreciate. But anyway, this is our quilt, and it's coming together. I'm a little hoarse today for some reason. But here it is, and here's the top. Let me see if I can show you the top. There it is with that last row on it. I think it's coming out really well. And I'm really enjoying it. It's exactly, well, I won't say it's exactly. It's very much like I anticipated that it would look like. The only thing I think is different is the sashing is a little wider than I first anticipated, but that's because this is going on it. If this trim was not going on it, I would have the sashing smaller, at least ½ an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch smaller. But it is very pretty, and it's just about the right size for the space that I need for this particular project. I hope you've enjoyed today's show, and you will give us a thumbs up, and be sure to share us with a friend that enjoys quilting or just likes lovely fabric design. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, check out our memberships if you're interested, and we'll see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Bye.